Senator from New Jersey.
I ask, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged. Is this reading this first? From further consideration of H.R. 2116 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed on the motion. Before I do this, sir, I would like to just read a brief statement, if I may, Mr. President. Thank you.
Proceed.
I'm really proud to be New Jersey's junior senator. Even more so, I'm proud that I've called Newark my home for most of my adult life. I can talk about my community for week's end. I know the President and presiding officers heard me talk about Newark for some time. It's an incredible community where we do not mistake wealth with worth. We know the value of goodness and decency. And a lot of my members of my community in the city of Newark are black and brown folks. And the special relationship they often have to their hair denotes deep cultural traditions. You go to my city right now and you'll find hairstyles from different types: locks, cornrows, twists, braids, Bantu knots, and of course what I once had, Mr. President, afros. You will find barbershops and hair salons aplenty that are dedicated to the upkeep of these beautiful hairstyles. One of my favorite things to do is to go to barbershops, to sit in community with folks and connect. I can write almost a dissertation probably, sir, right now about the role of barbershops in black and brown communities. They are incredible community cultural convenings. But I also want to say it's not always a source of joy. At times, the conversations turn to a deep source of hurt and pain. There's a decades-long problematic practice of discrimination against natural hair in this country. It was brought to the forefront in 2018 when a New Jersey student named Andrew Johnson was forced to cut his dreadlocks in the middle of a wrestling match. The entire ordeal was caught on camera, and as the scissors are brought out to cut Andrew's hair, you can see the deep hurt and pain on the face of this young man. It's the pain felt by many. Traumatic at times, hurtful experiences that make you question your very belonging in a community. The beauty of your hair, its natural style, your immutable characteristics, your cultural beliefs, your connection to your heritage. No person in America should have to deal with this pain. And that's why I stand here today, urging this body to pass legislation that is dear to my community's heart, dear to communities all across the country. It's named the Creating a Respectful and Open World for Natural Hair Act, otherwise known as the Crown Act. This bill is ultimately a matter of justice. Hair discrimination is real, it's continuing, and a pernicious problem for black and brown people in our country. It can lead to lost employment opportunities. It can lead to violations of students' civil rights. In short, it forces people to change parts of their very being so as to avoid harassment or punishment. A recent study from Michigan State University found that black women are 50% more likely to be sent home from the workplace because of their hair. And 80% of black women feel the need to change their hair from its natural state to fit in at the office. Another study from Duke University found that black women with natural hairstyles are less likely to land job interviews than white women or black women with straightened hair. Many students, other than Andrew, have had their civil rights violated. There have been cases in schools which have changed their dress code mid-year to place restrictions on hairstyles, targeting black students with locks and expelling them from school when they refuse to cut their hair. And although existing law prohibits some forms of hair discrimination as a type of racial or national origin discrimination, federal courts at times have narrowly construed this protection in a way that has allowed schools, workplaces, and other federal institutions to discriminate against people of African descent who wear certain types of natural or even protective hairstyles. And that's where the Crown Act comes in. This common sense, pragmatic piece of legislation is necessary. This legislation just clarifies the discrimination based on a hair texture or hairstyle that is commonly associated with a particular race or natural origin, including hair that is tightly coiled or tightly curled, locks, cornrows, twists, braids, bantu knots, and afros, is a prohibited form of discrimination. Since the moment I first introduced the Crown Act with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, who I am grateful for their work and leadership, we've worked to build more support. In the House, this bill passed with broad bipartisan support because of the strength of the lead of my colleague and friend from New Jersey, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman. Here in the Senate, Senator Collins has signed on to the bill, making it a bipartisan effort. And it's an effort that replicates what has already been done in 19 states, so-called blue states, such as mine or California, to so-called red states like Nebraska, Tennessee, and Louisiana. At its core, the Crown Act is a common sense policy. It is legislation that further protects the civil rights of Americans, but on a more profound and deeper level, it is a celebration of what makes up the wonderful fabric of our nation, the rich cultural diversity and the connections people have to their very identity. We know the significance that hair plays for the communities that make up the diverse American fabric. For Black folks, hair is rooted in stories of strength and resistance. During the time of slavery in Colombia, hair braiding was used to relay messages, including as a way to signal that one wanted to escape the lash of bondage. As one person eloquently described, the hair of Black women is a crown that tells a story of struggle, triumph, pain, pride, and comfort. The Crown Act is a chance for us to make sure that story and the stories of so many other cultures are told, a chance to make sure that those stories aren't punished but become more of an integral part of the larger American story. It's a chance to make sure that those stories aren't stigmatized to the point that some have to make the difficult decision to change their natural hair just to have a chance to land a job, to succeed at school, or to escape discrimination overall. This is a chance for us to make for a more perfect union, to bend the arc of the nation just a little bit more towards justice, to end another chapter, another area of deplorable discrimination, which is why today I ask for unanimous consent to pass the Crown Act. And so I guess, as in legislative session, I now ask for unanimous consent that the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 2116 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Mr. President,
The senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object, we all agree that racial discrimination is not only wrong, but illegal. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and other federal statutes prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. The Supreme Court found in the 1973 case, McDonnell Douglas Corporation versus Green, that using a pretextual reason as a cover for discrimination is a violation of federal civil rights law. Subsequently, the protections sought by this bill are already provided for in federal law. Using hairstyle as a pretext for racial discrimination is already illegal. But there is reason to believe that this bill is not ready for enactment. When the House Judiciary Committee considered this legislation, some members questioned whether this legislation would prevent certain hairstyles and lengths out of concern that they may hinder workplace safety or the ability to perform certain critical functions of the job. For example, employers may require certain hairstyles so that personal protective equipment properly protects the wearer. Many questions remain unanswered about whether this bill would prevent employers from imposing race-neutral standards, such as maintaining a hairstyle that makes it difficult to become caught in machinery on a factory floor, or the ability to properly wear a helmet at a construction site. This bill would make workers less safe, make it more difficult to start a business and provide jobs, and almost certainly result in expensive litigation and overburdened courts. I object.
Objection is heard.
If I'd like to say a couple things, I appreciate
Senator
my
from
colleague.
New Jersey.
Thank you very much for the recognition, Mr. President, to the presiding officer. I really heard the point about workplace safety. This bill does not prohibit employers from addressing safety concerns. Instead, it accounts for employers' legal obligation to ensure workplace safety. Written in the bill, Section 6B of the bill expressly prohibits that the employment non-discrimination provision shall be enforced in the same manner and by the same means, including with the same jurisdiction as if subsection was incorporated into Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In other words, employers will be no more burdened by this bill than they are under the current employment discrimination law. Under the long-standing burden-shifting scheme applied by the courts in Title VII cases, the employer may defeat a discrimination claim by asserting the workplace safety as a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for taking adverse employment action against an employee, with the burden then shifting to the employee to prove that the asserted reason was a pretext for discrimination. So this is addressed, and I appreciate that, but as was passed in a boldly bipartisan way, it was shown to be incorporated, that concern, in the bill itself. Again, this is something that has been passed in states like Tennessee and Louisiana. This has been shown to have wide bipartisan support. It's shown to be needed in the federal context, and I'm hoping that we, through continued deliberations, can actually get that passed. Mr. President, if I may have a leave to say one more thing. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to just wish you a Merry Christmas to the presiding officer. I appreciate the cheer and goodwill that is in this chamber, and I look forward to a happy